Kelly from the Delafield Quilt Company. If you're new here, welcome. If you're not new here, welcome back. I am so glad that you're here and you continue to watch. So I've got a really easy quilt project to share with you today that takes just one charm pack and some coordinating fabrics. And here's what this project looks like. So this was a really easy fast quilt to put together. So if you're looking for something that is simple, beginner friendly, and if you have an extra charm pack that maybe you're not sure what to do with, grab some coordinating fabrics and try this quilt because it really does come together pretty fast. And this quilt is not very big, so it's perfect for a baby quilt or a small lap quilt. It measures about 44 inches by 44 inches. All right, let me show you how I made this quilt. You don't need much fabric for this one, just the charm pack and then some coordinating fabrics. You need a 3/8 yard of each of the A and the B, which is your Harvest Gold and your olive green, and then 3/4 yard of that white fabric, which is fabric C, and about 3/8 yard for the border, which is a 2-inch finished border. So for my solids, I chose some Bella solids. I've got porcelain, olive, and Harvest Gold here. And then I picked a charm pack from the Evermore collection, which really has some nice pinks, reds, and the golds and that olive color in it. And the cutting instructions for this one are super simple. You just need to cut 6-inch squares. And to make it go fast, I'm just going to layer my fabric as much as I can safely cut it. So I've got about 4 layers here. I'm going to cut 4 strips, 6-inch strips from the white fabric. That's fabric C. And then I'm going to need 2 strips each from the Harvest Gold and the olive. And that should give me enough squares once I cut those down that I need for each of these. From fabric A and B, I need a total of 11 6-inch squares, and fabric C, I'm going to need 22 6-inch squares. So the only block we need to make for this quilt are the hourglass blocks, and we're going to make those pretty quick. We're going to use 2 at a time half square triangles, and then we're going to take those triangles, put them together, and we're going to make 2 at a time hourglasses. Next step is to draw a line diagonally on the back of the fabric C, the lighter squares. And I am just going to use my ruler here and my pencil to draw those lines. You're going to cut on this line, so you really don't need to worry about seeing that line. So a pencil for me works just fine. And I'm going to just place this ruler so that it is slightly below that top point, about the thickness of the pencil, and then slightly below the bottom point, again the thickness. That just allows for that space so that when I actually draw the line, it should be center from point to point. And I'm going to start in the middle and then draw that line out. And then I'm just going to repeat that on all of these white fabric C squares. So I am going to sew a 1/4 inch using my 1/4 inch foot from each side of the lines that I just drew. If you don't have a 1/4 inch foot, you're not quite sure where a 1/4 inch might be, go ahead and draw another 1/4 inch line from each side of those lines you just drew. If you've got a 1/4 inch foot, then you really shouldn't need that extra set of lines. All right, the next step is just to pair a C fabric with each of the A and B squares. And you want to make sure that you line up those edges nicely. And I'm going to keep the lighter fabric, so fabric C, on the top. And I want that pencil line facing up so that I know where to sew when I go to sew my 1/4 inch on both sides of those lines. And I am going to put a pin in place just to keep these sets together. And I'm going to go ahead and get all these ready to go so that when I'm at my sewing machine, I can just sew all of these squares together. And now I'm ready to sew a 1/4 inch from each side of the lines. And I'm just using my 1/4 inch foot as my guide. Then when I get to the end, I am just going to lift my needle up and my presser foot. I'm going to pull it out just a little bit to give myself a little bit of slack in the string. And then I'm just going to turn it and then sew right down the other side. And now that I've got all these sewn, I'm just going to take my ruler again and my rotary cutter, and I am going to cut right on that pencil line that I drew earlier. And then for each of these, I'm going to press the seam towards the darker fabric. So next, we just need to take 2 of our half square triangles and put them together to create an hourglass block. And I want one from the Harvest Gold and one from the olive green. And I want to make sure that I've got my seam lines lined up really nice so that when I go to sew it again and cut, I've got really nice points on the hourglass. And I am going to put a few pins in here just to make sure that I keep everything lined up nice. When I'm placing those pins, I'm just putting them right on the seam lines. That helps me to really keep my seams together when I'm sewing them. And then I'm going to grab my ruler and pencil again, and I'm going to, just like before, draw a line diagonally right down the center on the back of each of these sets. And now I just need to sew a 1/4 inch on both sides of the line, just like we made those half square triangles. And before I cut these, I'm just going to open them up quick and make sure that my seams lined up really nice. And I'm ready just to cut right on that line. And then I've got 2 hourglass blocks. And I do need to press these. It doesn't really matter at this point which direction I'm going to go in. I'm just going to try to be consistent. And then I need to trim these down. And I want to trim these so that they are 5-inch squares. And then they'll line up nicely with those charm squares. You do want to be careful when you're cutting down your hourglass blocks because you want to make sure that you're lining up all the corners really well. And I'm using the 45-degree mark on my ruler, and I'm looking at that 5-degree measurements on this, and I'm just making sure all of my corners are really nicely lined up, and I've got that 45-degree mark right on the seam line. And then I'm going to just cut 2 edges, turn it, line it up again, and then finish the cut. So you are going to need 41 hourglass blocks for this quilt. You should end up with 1 left over. Now to assemble the quilt, pretty simple. We're going to just alternate the hourglasses and the charm squares. But you do want to make sure that your hourglasses are all going in the same direction so that you've got the same color in the top, the same color on the sides, and the same color on the bottom. We have 9 rows total for this quilt. Each row contains 9 blocks, and we alternate starting with the hourglass, and then on the next row you'll start with the charm pack. And then I just need to finish laying this quilt out, and then I'm going to sew it all together and add that border. Well, I hope that you liked this video, and we'll try this quilt idea in the future. I think it's going to make a great baby quilt. If you haven't yet, please consider subscribing and visit our little quilt shop at delfieldquiltco.com. I hope that you have a great day.